Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Deszren. Most people call me Des. Feel free to call me whichever. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Today we are doing Xavier's LOC RETWIST. Super excited because look at his hair, y'all. It is beautiful. So let's get started. This is obviously the before. The product that I'm going to be using is NappStar's Super Hold LOC RETWIST Gel. And this was my first time using this stuff, y'all, but when I tell you it was the truth, like, this stuff is the truth. It smells so good. It's especially made for locks, and even though it has a hold to it, your hair is still really soft once it dries. It's insane. I don't know what they did with this product, but 10 out of 10, love it. So what I like to do when I do a retwist is I like to separate the hairs with my fingers first, which you saw me doing before this, just to get out any tangles or any parts that are tangled up together that should not be tangled up together. I feel like it's better to do it with your fingers first before you go in with the comb, just to avoid any unnecessary breakage. So once I do that, obviously I add the gel to the parts because it also helps clean up the parts and see exactly where you need to separate the hairs. I decided to go with the palm rolling method for this retwist. No special reason why, honestly, unless somebody requests a certain way for me to retwist their hair. I kind of just decide whenever I'm doing their hair, honestly. I feel like different people's hair in different circumstances require different procedures. So for his hair, I didn't really feel like it was necessary to do a comb retwist. For some of his locks, I did comb his new growth just a little bit, just to make it look more neat, and instead of like really tangled or kind of like spotty at his roots. It's kind of hard to explain unless you've like seen it yourself while you're doing hair, but sometimes if you don't comb or brush the new growth, it will just kind of like look weird and not neat. So for some of his locks, I did use a comb for the new growth, but obviously that is really people's preferences. I know within the lock community, some people like heavily frown upon using a comb. Some people say that they've used it the entire time that they've had their locks. So obviously it just depends on the person. What I am going to say is I don't recommend using a comb for starter locks when you're very early, or if you have like super loose hair, because yes, the comb is going to comb right through most of what has started to lock up. It really just does depend on the circumstance, but for someone like Xavier, I'm not worried about combing his new growth at all because he's had his locks for years now and his hair is obviously mature, has no problem locking up. So you guys are going to see me do the same thing throughout the video. Right now I'm separating his part with the comb. This is really helpful in seeing where exactly his part is and where exactly I need to separate the hairs, instead of just tugging at hairs that should not be tugged on. When it comes to palm rolling, you'll notice that I keep my hands mainly placed at the middle of his lock or closer to his new growth. And I do this because if you were to palm roll someone's locks the whole length of their hair repeatedly, that's going to contribute to thinning over time. And we do not want that. So I would just advise to stay close to the new growth or towards the middle of the lock and keep that consistent for each lock that you palm roll. Now, if you are truly a beginner at retwisting, it is very important to know that the most common direction that locks are retwisted in is the clockwise direction. So unless you notice that someone's locks are retwisted the opposite way, definitely stick to a clockwise direction with every single lock that you do. It is very important to remain consistent. When you are inconsistent with the direction that you retwist in, it can just cause your hair to lock a little bit slower, and you can kind of have like holes or like gaps in your locks, if that makes sense. So you definitely want to avoid that. So if the person that you're doing, if you're unsure if their hair was last retwisted clockwise, you can ask them, or before their hair is washed, just take a look at their new growth and kind of twist it and turn it different ways to see if it unravels or if it gets tighter, and then you know which direction to retwist the hair. I'm really spilling like all my tips and tricks. They're not really like tips and tricks, but they're just how I go about retwisting. But you guys have noticed, or if you didn't notice, I'm telling you right now, but I did not part the entire row going across. I part the lock and then I retwist that lock and then part the next lock and retwist. That's how I did it with Xavier's hair. Only because this was my first time retwisting his hair. So I didn't even really know like the pattern of his parts were or anything like that. But for people that I'm comfortable with, or people that have like a very clear cut brick lay or grid pattern, I will just part right across, and obviously it makes it go by a little bit faster. But you want to be careful with people like Xavier where they kind of have different partings. You don't want to just part straight across because you're literally gonna be ripping their hair out of their locks, and that is not a good look, and that is also very painful. So just be very mindful of that. You know, this is not a race. It's not a competition. No one's really timing you. Definitely just be patient and take your time when it comes to retwisting hair, because if you rush through it or are not really paying attention to the little things, then you can definitely damage someone's hair and really hurt them. So let's talk clip placement now, because I have gotten some questions on this and I feel like I can actually give you guys a pretty thorough answer now. So most of the clips that you see are mainly facing the opposite direction of the retwist. So the two prongs are facing the left. This helps keep it from unraveling. It can be placed in the same direction as the retwist, so facing the right, if being clipped to another lock. But also, it's really just good to pay attention to, is the lock lifting up, is it starting to unravel, and just adjust accordingly. You can alternate the directions if you notice locks are unraveling or sticking out to the side. So sometimes if you put a bunch of different clips on a handful of locks all going the same direction, it can end up turning those locks in that direction and can be uncomfortable for your client. So just keep an eye out for things like that and pay attention to little things like that that can actually be very uncomfortable. You'll notice that some of the locks around the edges, those clips get placed as the same direction as the retwist for the most part. It just helps keep them down. Normally, if I try to put the clip facing the other way with the locks around the edges, it kind of just flips over and unravels, and you don't want that. For longer and thicker locks, you can use duckbill clips. They're the longer clips. This helps hold down more than one lock, usually like 5 or more locks depending on the size, and you also are able to use less clips when you use the bigger ones. If you are going to use the longer clips, the duckbill clips, you can definitely place those more towards the middle of the locks depending on the length of the hair. With the shorter clips, I recommend placing either where the new growth and the lock meet or a little bit closer to the roots, but just make sure you're not hurting your client. Notice how it was so easy and pretty much effortless for me to separate these two locks. That's honestly the best case scenario when it comes to separating locks and cleaning up parts. Sometimes, depending on how long the person has gone without a retwist, it can be very difficult or it can be very easy to separate the locks. But sometimes you do have to kind of, use a little bit of force, and I hate to say rip the hair, but you are kind of ripping the hair out of the lock to get it back into the correct lock. But just be very mindful, and if you feel like there's too much tension and the hairs really don't want to come out, do not force it. When you rip out big chunks of hair out of the lock, it weakens it and leads to thinning. To set his hair, I use Cream of Nature Argan Oil Styling Mousse. I love this stuff because it smells really good and it doesn't leave any flaking, and it doesn't leave your hair crunchy either. After applying the mousse, I like to use these black edge wraps. I either use about 2 or 3, just depending on the person, depending on how much mousse I put on and where I put it. And this is to help tame any frizz and any flyaways. It really holds everything down while the hair is being dried. Sometimes when you don't do this, or if you skip this step, some flyaways might pop up and some frizz might pop up. So this just helps with that. I did have him sit under the dryer. I bounced back from medium to high heat depending on his tolerance, and after about 30 minutes, these were the results. I'm so happy with this new gel that I'm going to be using on clients now because it left no residue, no flaking, there's no buildup in his hair, and it just has such a nice hold, but also leaves the hair really soft and shiny. It's honestly just amazing. So I will link the gel in the description below so you guys can buy it. I did end up getting the family size. It is 16 ounces because I really do plan on using this on all my future clients. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really loved doing this retwist. It came out so good. I'm so happy with the results, and also he was happy with the results. So even better. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Bye guys.